Welcome to the shiur on Daniel, chapter 3, Perek Gimel.
So let's do a review for everybody of chapters 1 and 2, and then we'll get started on chapter 3. So who wants to give us a quick summary of chapter 1? Everyone's chewing.
Recruitment process to assimilate all the nations by Nebuchadnezzar. He gets the Jewish boys. It's the Hunger Games, and basically, let's see who's the best boys. Daniel steps up. He says, "Me and the boys, we got to make sure that we survive. So therefore, we're not going to eat the king's food. We're going to stay sharp." And then they won the contest.
Right. Okay. Very good. Okay, so that's chapter 1, where Daniel and his friends get selected to be advisors of the king. With the help of God giving them their wisdom and surviving on not eating the royal food. Chapter 1. Chapter 2, we're really entrenched in Bavel, and if you remember back from Bereshit, Bavel is where everything gets mixed up, right? Language gets mixed up. So in the like five psukim into chapter 2 or 3 psukim into chapter 2, the language shifts, right? One of the things we talked about is in the first chapter. You're being kind of brought down into Gullus, where the names of the Jewish names are taken away and they're given Goyish names, very similar to Yosef. And then in chapter 2, we lose the language, right? One of the other reasons that the Jews were merited Geula in Mitzrayim was that they kept their language. In chapter 2, we switch from Hebrew into Aramaic, and we're going to be in Aramaic for a while. So chapter 2, essentially what happens is that Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He doesn't remember the dream, or maybe he doesn't want to say what the dream is, not 100% clear, but he wants people to tell him both the dream and its interpretation, again, shades of Yosef. And all the king's men and wise men are not able to do that. They're like, that's impossible, no one's able to do that. So the king is pissed off with your heads. He wants all the wise men killed. Daniel finds out about this from his good friend, the Lord High Executioner, who he's able to convince to kind of get him in to see the king. He buys himself a night. Through the night, God appeared. He davens with Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, his friends. During the nighttime, Hashem explains the dream to him and its interpretation. He comes back to the king and goes through a whole rigmarole explaining what this dream was, which is this giant statue. He tells Nebuchadnezzar, you had this dream and there was a statue of a human being, and it was made of 4 different metals, right? There's gold, silver, copper, bronze, and then iron, and then at the feet of this thing, right, so the gold is the head, and then the silver, the body, and goes all the way down. And then the iron that is made of the shins and the feet, at the feet it's mixed with clay. And then Nebuchadnezzar sees this giant boulder that appears out of nowhere, smashes the stone into nothing, and then the boulder becomes a giant mountain. And Daniel explains to him that each of these different metals is actually a different kingdom. You, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold, and then after you there's going to be another kingdom which is less awesome than you, silver, and then we go down into the different metals. And the reason that the feet have this mixture of iron and copper is because there's going to be a mixture of people, and they're not going to clay, thank you, is because the people are not going to mix, right? Just like clay and iron don't mix. The people are not going to adhere to one another. They're not going to be unified. And then this boulder that you saw is the kingdom of Hashem, which will come and rule for eternity. Now, it's important to point a couple things out. So we're going to get to that. That's I think it's a very astute observation. They're all part of one person. They're all part of one statue.
Right, no, I'm saying, but the Nebuchadnezzar on top, he's not necessarily the bronze or the silver portion, right?
Correct. So one of the things that I want to point out is that Daniel doesn't tell him who these other kingdoms are. It's not a very direct interpretation in terms of, he didn't say, okay, the next one after you will be Persia and Media, and then there's going to be...
You're going to be conquered, and all the stuff that you worked for is going to be destroyed. That wouldn't be so wise.
Right, so we're going to get...
Maybe your son is going to be the silver one.
So we'll get... What's that? He did say you are the head of gold, and then after you will be other kingdoms. So the meforshim over all the generations kind of struggled to identify what are these four kingdoms, right? Is the last kingdom of iron Rome, and then mixed with clay is maybe Ishmael, and there's a lot of different ways to kind of interpret this because Daniel has been a little bit intentionally vague. So that's important to know just in general. And then by way of conjecture, I want to point out something that I think, Shimon, you were hitting on a little bit, which is there's no sense that these kingdoms are interacting with each other, certainly not fighting each other or destroying one another, right? In reality, in the history, it's not just that like Bavel was done and then like Paras and Madai showed up and said, okay, we're kind of going to continue being just like you, we're just a little less awesome. One kingdom wipes out another, right? They intentionally do away with the kingdom that is before them, and Daniel doesn't mention that at all, and that's not necessarily in the dream at all.
In the dream, simple interpretation from the boulder, right? The Yad Hashem comes and knocks out the bottom generation or kingdom. Everyone comes crashing down, but there's really no correlation.
Right.
There's no correlation, because the Nebuchadnezzar has already been done already.
Right. If you compare this to the dreams of Paro, so you have like the 7 bad years are wiping out all memory of the years before them. You don't have that. You have all 4 coexisting almost, right? And one, like, it's great to be the head of gold.
It's like the weakest link brings out everyone, but that's not really the case.
Right. And so it'd be interesting to kind of think about why that is. Okay, so then at the very end of chapter 2, after Daniel gives this whole, he tells him the dream, he tells him the interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar is blown away, right? He was told by every wise man, like, this is completely impossible. No, this guy did it, and he did it all in a very Yosef-like way, like, it's not me, it's God, and, God is able to do this, and he wants you to know, so I'm just here to tell you what God has to say. So Nebuchadnezzar immediately, like, bows down to Daniel and offers korbanos to Daniel, and essentially treats Daniel like a god. And he tells everyone else, like, you have to, take care of Daniel. He's super awesome, amazing. And by the way, Daniel kind of carves out for his friends, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, like, hey, don't forget about my friends. They're also super awesome, so let's make sure they're in charge of lots of things too. So that is our segue into chapter number 3,
which is a complete non sequitur, or
well, we'll have to evaluate that a little bit in terms of how chapter 3 is a follow-up to chapter 2, if it is or if it is not.
They weren't advisors going into the dream?
Say that again?
They weren't advisors yet?
There were advisors. They were.
No, Daniel wasn't yet. No, he wasn't. Well, he
was. Okay.
He was.
So.
All four.
Right. So it's a very fair question, and there's different opinions in the meforshim. When did chapter 2 take place? Did chapter 2 take place sort of in the middle of chapter 1, where chapter 1 ends with Daniel being elevated, and chapter 2 was kind of like on the way? Or did Daniel get elevated at the end of chapter 1, and then chapter 2 is, okay, you were at like level 10, now you're at like level 1, or maybe the other way around. Like he moved up a bunch of steps. Okay, so again, to save people from the horrors of reading this Aramaic, I will attempt to go through it. So we're going to start chapter 3 now. Nebuchadnezzar Malka Ovid Salem Didahav. So he makes a statue, and the whole thing is gold, right? So if Daniel told him, you're the head of gold in the dream, so Nebuchadnezzar's like, you think I'm the head of gold? I'm the whole kit and caboodle, right? Rume Amin Shisin, Pasya Amin Shis. So he makes this giant statue, 60 amos tall, but only 6 amos wide. So anything that you would build that is 120 feet high and 12 feet wide, it's going to fall over, right? Now, again, we go back to Bavel, right? You're in. Remember, you're in Bavel. You're in the place that made Migdal Bavel, where they tried to show Hakadosh Baruch Hu, like, we don't need you. We can build a tower to the sky. Oh, what happened?
Maybe that was the problem. Maybe they were such bad engineers that they couldn't get it started.
Right.
Their architect school was was
a little iffy.
Lower tier.
There was actually historically there was a Colossus in Rhodes that was a little bit bigger than this, but they were able to make stuff this big back in the ancient world. So Akime bebikat Dura, and it was set up in the valley of Dura. b'medina Bavel, again in Babylon. U'nebuchadnezzar malka shlach. So now you're going to get a whole bunch of names, and no one really knows the difference between all of these names. There's lots of different opinions. The purpose, part of the purpose in listing everybody, and we're going to see, you're going to list them over and over and over again, is like pomp and circumstance, right? It's very highfalutin and like official court talk of, we didn't just invite, and you see this a little bit in Megillas Esther, that there's these people and those people, and this one gets to see the face of the king, and the idea is to puff up the fact that, like, I don't just have some advisors, I have these kinds of advisors and that advisors, and every time I need to tie my shoe, I have an advisor. That's what we've got over here. So Nebuchadnezzar Malka Shlach LeMichnash Lachashtar Penayas Agnaya Upachavosa Adagar Raya Gadavraya Detavraya Tiftaya V'chol Shultan Medina. So he invites all of the various kinds of dignitaries Lemesel Chanukas Tzalma to come and join the inauguration of this statue. The Hakim Nebuchadnezzar Malka that Nebuchadnezzar set up. Okay, so I guess we'll get to in the third pasuk, but this statue poses very interesting halachic problems. Is this avodah zarah or is this a political statue, right? And depending on what it is, will determine whether or not it's a problem to bow down to it. If it's Nebuchadnezzar's own Mount Rushmore, so you can bow down to Mount Rushmore all day long, it doesn't really matter, you're just showing deference to the king. There's nothing wrong with that. If it's an avodah zarah and you bow down to it, then you're chayv misa. So there's a very big... No, you're showing deference. Everyone knows that the way you show deference to the royalty is to, give them a little shackle, right? They have a whole like slew of Marduk and all. They've got their gods, and then they have this gold statue. So this gold statue is not necessary. It doesn't say on it like avodah zarah. It's just the gold statue.
There's a precedent for rulers declaring themselves as
for sure.
But at the same
I would
time,
think, I would think that would be enough to make it the same thing. Like it's too subjective. Like each person's going to decide whether or not this is a avodah zarah. Like
not necessarily that it's whether or not it's avodah zarah, but what is the purpose of it? Is the purpose of it political in nature or is it religious in nature? What you're saying is the two are the same. It's a theocracy. So it could be. There's no indication overtly that that's the case.
okay.
You were going to say something.
But in the same time period with Haman, the Jews all bowed down to Haman. They
Right.
were not doing what was Zara.
It wasn't an image of Haman. It was to the...
It was just that at that time period, I think you bowed
You
down.
bowed,
to things.
yeah.
It's to a person, to show respect to a person, but to an image of
I
the
think
title
that's-
of the person.
Okay, so let's read the pasuk and then we'll get to the medrash that talks a little bit more about this. Oh, say.
I'm not sure that's keyword, maybe.
So, ba'dayin miskanshin achashtar penayas agnaya pachvosa adagar zraya gadavraya tavraya taftaya v'chol shultan medinasu l'chanukas salma. So they all come, right? Pasuk Gimel is basically just a recapitulation of Pasuk Beis. They were supposed to come and they came. Dihokin Nebuchadnezzar Malka. The kaimin lakabel salma dihokin Nebuchadnezzar, and they come to now pay deference to this gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar made. So, how are you going to pay deference? You have to bow down to it, but how do you know? We've got like 100,000 people that have showed up and at the stadium to bow down, so you need someone playing the organ so that they know when it's time to applaud or do the wave or whatever. The karoza kare bechail lechon amrin amamaya umaya v'lishnaya. So the announcer, he proclaims, "Oh, you various people from different lands in every language," right? This sounds very much like Megillas Esther. Each, everyone according to his language. We have the same thing over here. All peoples of the world, in every language that you speak, here's what you have to do. Follow these instructions. Ba'adina de timshe'un kal, when you hear the voice of, and again, more pomp and circumstance, karna mashrokita, katros, sabcha, pesanterin, symphonia, v'chol zine zamra. These are all different kinds. There's like windpipes and horns, and
They got an orchestra.
yeah, they have a whole different orchestra. And some of these words people harp on because they're Greek words, so they should they have been. Let's back up. Who, just as a recall from chapter 1, who wrote Sefer Daniel? Any takers? Anshe Knesset Hagdola, right? So the Anshe Knesset Hagdola lived later than Daniel. Daniel is, remember, Beis HaMikdash is destroyed 586, second Beis HaMikdash 516. Daniel is, this story is taking place sometime in between there when they're in Galus Bavel. The Anshe Knesset Hagdola is hundreds of years later. So if there's a Greek word in here like symphonia, which is symphony, right? That's the Anshe Knesset Hagdola. V'chol zine zamra, tiflun v'tiskedun l'tzelem davo dihakim Nebuchadnezzar malka. So when you hear the whole, chorus of instruments, that's when it's time to bow down to this idol or statue, I should say, that Nebuchadnezzar set up. Okay. Umin di lo yipel vis good ba shata yisramei lego asun nura yakidita. And if anyone doesn't do that at that exact time, anyone who doesn't bow down, they're going into the fiery furnace. Bad stuff. Okay. So now this is again very standard language. You'll see this phrase over and over again. Kol kabel. Kol kabel dana bezimna. So at that time, Kadei Shamin, Kolamamaya, Kal, Karna, Mashro Kita, Katrosh, Sabcha, Pasantarin, V'chozin Zamra. So when everything actually happened and the band played, Naflin Kol Mayu Maya V'lishnaya, so everybody of every language fell on their face. Agid L'tzelem Dava Di Hakim Nebuchadnezzar Malka. They all did that, except Kol Kabel Dana, at that time, Bezimna, Karivu Guvrin Kazdoin, so at that time, some of the advisors, remember in the last chapter, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah were kind of elevated, and nobody likes to have someone kind of leapfrog them in terms of the ladder of importance, certainly not a whole bunch of Jews who should have been slaves. So the advisors don't like what's going on, so they come and they do this really interesting thing. The word in Aramaic, achlu kartsehon, the phrase means, like colloquially means like gave them something to chew on, right? They spoke lashon hara, but the literal translation is they ate their winks. Achlu kartsehon, ate their winks, like winking with your eye. The Rashi describes it as like a cocktail party, right? They came in, they had something to eat, they winked, like I got something to tell you, like talking on the sly, right? That's essentially what they're doing over here. So. Guvrin Kastoin are one of the various advisors to the king. So Anu v'amru Nebuchadnezzar Malka. They answer and say again everything very verbose in the Aramaic. Malka la'almin chayim, king, live forever. But we've got to tell you something. Ant Malka samto te'em di chol anash di yishma kal karna mashrokita katros sabchaya pasantarin v'simfonia v'chol zine zarma. You, king, made this decree that anyone who hears the following 15 different instruments, yipol v'yizgod l'tzelim dava, that they should all bow down to this gold statue. Umidi lo yipol v'yisugod yisremei lego asun nuria kiditan. Anyone who doesn't do that gets thrown into the fiery furnace. Again, this is all stuff we know, but they're just kind of confirming it with the king, because once they get him to agree that, yes, that is the law, right? Remember from Esther, and again, just as a reminder, Esther happens after Daniel, so when we say remember from Esther, we're just talking because everyone's familiar with Esther. But remember that when there is a law passed, no one is able to abrogate that law, right? Laws are super, etched in stone. So, Itai Guvron Yehudayin, Di Manisa Yashon al Avidas Medinas Bavel. There are these Jews that you appointed to be in charge of a whole bunch of stuff in Babel. Remember them? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego? Guvraya Ilech, those guys, Lo Samu Allah, Malka Ta'im. They don't pay attention to anything you have to say. Lo Lohach, Lo Palchin, they don't bow down to your God. Uletzelam Dahava Di Hakemas Lo Sagdin. And they don't bow down to your statue. So this is where.
Question.
What's that?
The big question that's sitting in front of you. What about Daniel?
Okay, so you asked it earlier than I was going to get to, but I'll get to it now. So the Medrash.
They're too afraid because they know that Daniel's good with the king and that if he says anything, they're going to kill him. Or maybe Daniel wasn't there that day.
Right. So Daniel, this is the only parak in the book that Daniel's not mentioned at all. So the Medrash kind of fills in that he hightailed it out of there, that he was intentionally not there. Either he's on a diplomatic mission, or he was afraid Nebuchadnezzar started worshiping him, and he was afraid that was going to end badly for him, or the people that were called to bow down were a certain level of advisor, and Daniel is like higher than that. Like, you don't call me to do anything. I'm the cream of the crop, right? I'm like Yosef level vizier number 2. I'm not coming with you guys to bow down to anything. That's like for lower level people. So that's why he wasn't there. But they address the fact that Daniel is not here and not included in this story at all. The other thing I will point out to you, very similar to Megillus Esther. In Megillus Esther, did we talk about this? How much does Mordechai talk?
No, very little.
2 psukim. 2 psukim, the entire book of Esther.
You better do this, otherwise
right.
salvation will come from elsewhere.
Right. It records Mordechai doing other stuff or like talking to Esther, but it doesn't record actual words from Mordechai other than those 2 psukim in Perek Daled. In the whole book of Daniel, we get like 2 psukim from Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah. Other than that, they don't say anything the entire book before or after. Okay, so there are these Jews, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Oh, so this vav litzelem seems to make it sound like they don't do 2 separate things. A, they don't bow down to they don't worship religiously the way you want them to, and B, they don't bow down to this statue. So that does not sit well with Nebuchadnezzar, who, like Achashverosh, gets mad at the drop of a hat. So, but then Nebuchadnezzar bergaz v'chamei, he gets really angry. Amar lahayatoya l'shadrach meshach v'abednego, and you might expect just to say off with their heads, but they've already kind of ingratiated themselves. So, bring me Shadrach, Meshach, v'Abednego, ba'adayin guvrin ilech hitayu kadom malka. So they bring them before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar gives them a way out. Ana Nebuchadnezzar v'amar lahon, hatzda Shadrach, Meshach, v'Abednego, is it true, my 3 friends, lo hai lo iseichon palchini, you don't worship my God.
Lo hai, right.
Right, you don't worship.
This statue's the God. That's
No,
clarifying.
Just the opposite. He says, A, you're not worshiping my gods. The advisor said 2 things. They don't keep your religion, and they don't worship your statue. And he says, is it true that you don't keep my religion, lo sagdin, and you don't worship my statue? What's up with you guys? You're very weird. Now remember, back in the day, in the world of Bavel, you worship everything, right? Like, there's no concept of monotheism. It's weird. It's less like upsetting that you don't worship my God than it is weird, right? Everybody just worships every God, especially if imagine you're like an ignorant peasant and you get conquered by some other country, and they're like
stronger.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's our God Marduk that allowed us to conquer you. Okay, I might as well light some incense to Marduk, right? What do I have to lose?
They did the Jews.
What's that?
They know the Jews.
It's like a weird concept for them to get their head around. Like, I just conquered you. Just what do you got to do? Light a candle for Marduk? So light a candle for Marduk. Like, what's your problem? Bow down to the stupid thing.
It wasn't well known that the Jews didn't do that.
It
doesn't matter.
Even if it's known, it doesn't register.
It's
weird.
We'd be like the Scientologists to them. Like what is with you guys? You're freaking nuts. Or the J Witnesses, or like those Jews are crazy.
Okay, so Ka'an hein aiseichon asidin di beidana di tishmuun kalkanaya mashrokita katros sabchaya pasantarim v'symfonia v'chol zani zamra tiflun v'tiskadun letzalma di avedas v'hein lo tiskadun ba shata tisramim lagon asun nuria kidita umau ale di yeshez v'nechon min yidai. Okay, so in case you didn't know, says Nebuchadnezzar, let me just fill you in on what needs to take place. There's going to be a band, and when you hear the band, bow down on the statue. Got it? Otherwise, you're in big trouble because I'm going to throw you into this giant fiery pit that we have over here, and what God could possibly save you from that? Right?
Why is he asking a rhetorical question at the end of this puzzle? That's what gets me.
It's almost like Paro. Like, who's this Hashem that you think is going to save you from Mitzrayim? Like, I get it. You have some God. Okay, that's fine. I don't really care. But there's a giant pit over here, right? I'm going to set you on fire.
Yeah, but he also already heard Daniel say, "God revealed to me your dream, buddy."
Yeah, that's great. God's a dream revealer. Amazing. But you know what gods don't do? They don't stop people from getting killed. Like, it's great, Daniel, that you have this magic god who fills stuff in your head, and that's cool. And no problem. We should all like light some incense to your god. But there's a fiery pit over here. Like, I'm gonna shoot you in the face. Okay? What are you gonna do? What god is gonna save you from me shooting you in the face?
Yeah, if it was so black and white, they would have converted to Judaism.
Yeah, well, you're gonna see. That's basically what he tries to do at the end. So, spoiler. Anu Shadrach. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are nonplus from this whole setup over here of the giant fiery thing. The Amrim, and they say Lamalka Nebuchadnezzar. Lo Chaishinan Ana. I'm sorry. This is actually, it's important to read this the right way. The Amrin Lamalka, and they say to the king as follows: quote. They don't call him king.
They call him dude. Like,
Yeah.
they call him by his first name.
Right.
Hey, Sal.
Yeah, right. Nebuchadnezzar lo chashchin anachna al denei piskam lahatavusach. We have no interest in talking to you about this. I don't care what you just said. Neener, neener. They stuck their fingers in their ears and la 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 la. Right. I don't care what you say. Hein itaya lahana di an chana. Palchin Yachil l'sheizavusana minasun nuria kidita umin yadach malka yisheziv. We have this God, and He can totally save us from everything. We're not worried at all. But just so you know, we will also hedge our bets. Vehein lo yadil lahave loch malka. Vehein lo, and if not, then yadil lahave loch malka. King, you need to know di la lohach lo isana palchin u'letzelim dava di hakimnas. Lo nis good. And if God chooses not to save us, okay, we're still not bowing down and we're still not playing ball. So we don't really care. Do whatever you want to do because we're not scared of you. So the Medrash kind of jumps on this and describes a whole scene where Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah go to Yechezkel. So Yechezkel is alive at this time. He was one of the Nevi'im that prophesied at the end of Bayis Rishon, and he's still around. And they go to Yechezkel, and they're like, look, there's this statue, and we have to go. What should we do? And Yechezkel's like, oh, let me go ask God what you should do, because these guys are not Nevi'im, right? And the message he gets back from God is, I have nothing to do with this. So he tells Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, like, God's not getting involved. And they're like, you know what? Don't care. We're going to not bow down, and if he throws us in a fiery furnace, then so be it. And if God doesn't save us, then God doesn't save us. And Chazal learned from there that, like, if you ain't somchen al anes, right, that you're not allowed to go do something and assume that God will save you from the fiery anything. There is a lot of overlap between that story and Abraham and the Kivshon Ha'esh, right? Abraham, again, in Bavel, gets thrown into a fiery pit. Then you have Abraham's brother, who's like, oh, that worked out really well for Abraham. Then, right, he's somchim al anes, and that's where you know you're not supposed to. So he doesn't do it lishma versus these guys who are doing it lishma. And then, of course, in the Medrash, so after Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah leave Yechezkel, so Yechezkel goes like, what's going on? And God's like, no, I'm going to take care of them. I can't tell them I'm going to take care of them, because then they don't get any zchus for jumping in the fire if they know that everything's going to be good.
Yechezkel is outside of Eretz.
Yechezkel is outside of Eretz Yisrael. Yes.
He was one of the only Nevi'im who got Nevuah outside.
Right.
That's like
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I don't have a good answer for how the Ramban holds that you can't have Nevuah outside of Eretz Yisrael. Is it Nevuah? Is it Ruach HaKodesh? They kind of dance around that point, but it's a well taken point. Okay, so. Right. Is it a dream? Is it right? Like, what kind of message is it? There's certainly baskol and things like that outside of Eretz Yisrael. You have in the Gemara and all the time. There's a baskol that this, that, or the other happened. Okay, so but Dai Nebuchadnezzar hislami chema. So Nebuchadnezzar, like Achashverosh, gets mad at the drop of a hat. Right. So this was more than a drop of a hat. He gets really mad. Utzalem an pohi ishtane. And his face changes. He's so mad that it's like those cartoons, right, where the guy, right, and his eyes, like and you have to remember, the face of the king. We talked about this, I think, a lot by Esther. Seeing the face of the king and the concept of the face of the king is like a very important thing. Like, there are only certain people who can see the face of the king, and does the king's, like, lahavdil. We talk about this in Tanakh, that, like, that Hashem shows His face or doesn't show His face, right? It's this idea that like all of the majesty of the kingdom is on the face of the king. So when the Nebuchadnezzar's face changes, it means that like
Serious business.
right? You haven't just insulted Nebuchadnezzar; you've insulted all of Bavel, right? So Al Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Ane v'Amar. So he says as follows: Lemeza la'atuna chad shiva al dichaze lemezye. So I want this furnace. What's it usually at? 1,000 degrees. I want it at 7,000 degrees. Okay, make it. I don't even know if that is right. I don't even know if that's a number. Make it 7. And there's a parallel here intentionally in terms of how this is written. As Nebuchadnezzar gets angrier, the fire has to get angrier, right? Like they both have to kind of go to the absurd level. Now, call forth my soldiers, Amar lekafosa l'shadrach meshach v'Abednego, and I want you to lock up, put them in handcuffs, lemirme la'asun nur yakidita, so that you can toss them into this fiery furnace, which is kind of ensconced in the ground, and then has walls that are above the ground. I'm trying to be cognizant of time over here, so we'll skip some of the midrashim. Okay, Badayin guvrin ilech kisfu. So again, the king says, okay, bind them. So they bind them. B'sar v'lehon, patshehon v'karbolosahon, ulevushehon, uremiv lego asun nur yakidita. So these men, in their.
Are you guys in a hurry? I kind of want to hear the midrash.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So this is actually an important point. In Pasuk 21, they are dressed up, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we're told, are wearing their shirts, trousers, hats, and other garments. That's when they get bound up and get taken to the fiery furnace.
Not only is it 7,000 degrees, you're going to be in your winter clothing in the middle of summer. So you're going to have to wear your winter coat to the furnace party.
So this is what's interesting. Chazal learned from here that if a person has to die al Kiddush Hashem,
right,
that they should show no fear. That dress in your finest clothing to die al Kiddush Hashem, right? That's what you learned from them. That they got dressed up to do it, and so we talked in the first parak about changing the names. In the second parak we talked about changing the lashon. Here you have in the third parak they're holding stark to wearing the Jewish clothing, right? It's in the most dire of times. They're putting on the tzitzis and they're right. There is an amazing story about Rav Schwab, who apparently he was in Nazi Germany. He gave some shiur Friday night where he mentioned something about like interlopers, and someone ratted him out to the Nazis about what he said. And they told him that he's under investigation. So usually when you're under investigation, this is before right. So it wasn't at that point yet. But so he's told he's under investigation, and he has to call to see if the case is cleared or not. So he calls like week after week, and after 2 or 3 months, the Nazi who answers the phone is like, "Don't you stupid Jew? Don't you know that like this matter has already been closed?" So he knew that like he was safe, but he told his students that every night from the time that happened, he wouldn't go to sleep in pajamas. He would wear his suit to bed. And they asked him why, and he said because other people who'd been under investigation, they would usually get grabbed in the middle of the night and they would get hung, right? And he said it's not right for a rabbi to get hung in his pajamas. If I'm going to get killed by the Nazis and hung up, I want to be in my suit. That's Rishon. Like the presence of mind is just mind-boggling. But you see, that's what's going on over here with Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah. So they're in their finery and they're being hauled out in chains to this fiery furnace. Kol kabel dina min di milas malka machzifa. So they're following this order with chutzpah in it. This order of like very strongly projected order from the king, the asuna azeh yatira, and they heated up the furnace more than it could possibly even withstand. Guvraya ilech di hasiku l'shadrach meshach v'Abednego, and then these bouncers from the army who are hauling out the Jews to the fire, katel himahom sheviva dinura. They were killed by like a flick of the flame that bursts out from the oven hits them, they die, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fall into this fiery pit. These men, the three of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, naflu lego asura asun nura yakidita mikasfin. They fall bound into the oven, into the fiery furnace, which is not here, even though I keep pointing to it. Okay, so end scene. Next scene, we have a very perplexed King Nebuchadnezzar. Adayin Malka Tave Vikam Bihispahala. So Nebuchadnezzar gets up and he's like hurried in his confusion. Ane v'Omar, and he calls out to his advisors who are always at hand. Lahadabroe, to his friends. Hello, Guvrin plus Ramine Lego Nura Mekasfin. Didn't we throw 3 guys bound into the fire? Onin va'amrin lamalka yatsiva malka, and they say, yeah, that's correct. Now they don't pick up on the fact that he's asking kind of a rhetorical question because he knows very well how many people were thrown in there. So you might want to kind of rush over to the window that Nebuchadnezzar must be standing at. There is a medrash, by the way, that he also gets partially incinerated when he gets too close to look through this window or whatever they have, so he can see what's going on in there. I see 4 people. Shrin Mahalchin Bego Nura, they're just hanging out in the fire. The Chovel Lo Isi Bahon, and the fire has no effect on them. The Rave Dirivia, and the appearance of this 4th guy who's magically here, Dome Le Bar Alin. It's like Bar Alin literally means like the son of a godly one. Yeah, so we get to angel a little bit later because he kind of walks back this but we had this by Eov, that the B'nai HaElohim, right, is another way to refer to malachim, and I think most people are familiar with the medrash of the different malachim that are arguing over how they get to save Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah. You have a malach that's in charge of the cold, and he wants to go and like freeze out the whole thing. And then you have Gavriel, who's the malach in charge of fire, and he's like, no, I'm going to go, and it's like an even greater miracle because I'm going to like, right? It's not conflicting. I'm going to take the fire away with using the fire itself. But the idea is there's a malach here that is protecting Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, and Nebuchadnezzar sees it with his own eyes. So Badayin Karev Nebuchadnezzar Litra Asun Nur Yakidita. So when Nebuchadnezzar comes close to this window or whatever this is by the furnace, Ane Amar. So now he talks to them, and he says, Shadrach, Meshach, v'Abednego, Avdohi de Eloha Elah. You guys who are the servants of the Most High God of all, Puku ve'eso, you want to come out? Ba'dayin nefikin Shadrach, Meshach, v'Abednego mingo nura. So they just walk right out. And again, there's lots of really colorful midrashim about how the whole contraption basically explodes, like the walls of this oven.
Like in an action movie, like when you're walking out and the whole thing explodes behind them.
Yeah. And that the heat from it, there's like lava or whatever comes out of this fiery pit, goes and knocks over Nebuchadnezzar's statue and basically melts it away. There's also there's a lot of, and I would encourage you to read them because they're very like.
Where are these midrashim?
You can in the Yalkut Shimoni probably find most of them. There's some that are in the Otzer Midrashim has a whole thing on Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a whole like it's a massive experience for Nebuchadnezzar, and it completely transforms him. So he went from what God could possibly save you to he saw with his own eyes an angel come down and save these people, and now he's totally blown away. So now he brings together his advisors, and you'll see the list is shorter than it used to be, and the reason is that the other advisors have all been killed, right? They all got like burned out by the fire. And the advisors that are left are the ones who are at the tail end of the list because they were like further back in the stadium, right? It's like don't sit too close to Shemu or you're gonna get wet. Like that's the higher up advisors all
the
got
wasted.
wasted.
Blue Man Group.
Right, exactly. The hadavrei malka chazin leguvraya ilech di lo shalit nura begesh mahon usara shehon lo hischarach v'sar belehon lo shano v'reach nur lo adas bahon. So these guys, they don't even smell like fire, right? They don't have that cigarette smell on them. Nothing. Their hair smells fine. Like they're completely unscathed by this whole experience. And Nebuchadnezzar is completely transformed by the whole experience. So on Nebuchadnezzar v'Amar, Nebuchadnezzar now is blessing God. Brich Elahahon di Shadrach Meshach v'Abednego di Shalach Malachei. That blessed is the God of Shadrach Meshach v'Abednego who sent his malach. Right now he's a malach v'Sheziv lavdohi. Alohi, and saved his servants who put their trust in him. Umilas Malka Shaniv, and they ignored the rule of the king. V'yahavu gishmahon di lo yifluchun v'lo yiskadun l'chol lo lahen la'alahahon, and rather they served their Hakadosh Baruch who is greater than any other god that there is. Umine seem to aim, and now I'm making the following proclamation: Di kol am uma velishon di yemar sholu al lahon di shadrach meshach v'Abednego hadiman yisaved. Anyone who mocks or speaks badly about the God of the Jews, this we actually had this exact phrase in the last parak. They're going to be torn to bits. And ubese nivole yishtave, and their house will be put to ruin. You have this also by Haman. Not only is the person killed, but their house is taken away from them, right? Haman's house goes to Mordechai instead. But the idea is not only is the person wiped out, but all their worldly possessions, there's no remnant of them whatsoever. Kol kabel di lo aisi Allah acharon di yuchol lahatzola kidnap, because there's no other God who can do anything like this. These people are amazing. Their God is amazing. Badain Malka Hatzlach Shadrach Meshach v'Abednego b'Medinas Bavel, and so they are now appointed to, they've moved up to the next tier of being in charge of stuff in Bavel. Is who? Nebuchadnezzar sincere? Yeah. He seems pretty sincere until the next time where he's not sincere. Again, like Paro and like you can have the Makkah and believe in God, and then you can not believe in him so much again. Now, the next couple psukim at the end of this parak and the beginning of the next parak all belong together. Remember, the prakim are not Jewish. The prakim are from the Archbishop of Canterbury in like the 13th century. So we're going to, I think, stop here because otherwise it reads very weird. Where basically Nebuchadnezzar is sending out this proclamation to everybody. So we will save that for next time.